message. Let me know if you can hear the voice, if everything's okay. Let's play a little kick drum action here. See if we can hear this. Let me know if we have audio. And yeah, turn that off. Let's double check here. So as soon as you hear something in the stream, definitely go in the chat and let me know, so that you can see if we are actually live. Finally live. Yeah. So let's see. Sounds lovely. Sweet. Well, hey. Amazing. It's great to be back. It has been a hot minute since I was live on here, streaming on here, and so yeah, back to talk about all the changes, go through some gear stuff, talk about Superbooth and upcoming gigs and travel and moving and Europe and all kinds of stuff. So yeah. Hold on tight. There's going to be a lot going on today. But first and foremost, I'm really glad that all of you guys are joining today. And I'm glad that this worked, because this has been kind of an ordeal to get this going. We've had to get new internet service to where we are in order to have enough speed to be able to stream. Hopefully it is enough speed to be able to stream. Let's see. And then, yeah, connecting this in a really different way. I don't have my home studio mixer that I had, and I used to run all the gear through the mixer, and then the audio from that mixer into the streaming software, and that. Now I've got audio from my rig going into one camera, and audio from my mic going into another camera, mixing them in the streaming software. So let's see. We're going to, yeah, try to jump back in and do a good old stream again, but with this new setup. So yeah, so welcome back. Let's quickly go over where we are. As you can see, I'm not in the same place that I was for the last few years. We have moved. Right now we are in Mexico, in a beautiful spot called Valle de Bravo, which is about 2 hours outside of Mexico City. It's amazing. In this beautiful house with a chance to set up my gear and be inspired. I have a lovely view out the window. I think I can show you. Let me see if I can set this up really quick. I think I can show you my view with my phone camera. So let's do this, and let's go to the phone view, maybe. Let's see if it connects. It's connecting, so we'll see if we can get it to connect, and if we can, I'll show you the view. Otherwise, yeah, let's chat about stuff. If you have any questions or comments or anything, please put those in the chat. I'll be able to keep up with that, so we can I can help you out with any questions that you have. In the meantime, I wanted to let you know that one of the things that I've done as part of this big move and the big changes that are going on is that I have refired up my Patreon. So if you're interested, there's a link right there on the screen, patreon.com/Circo. Go ahead and you can sign up for free if you want, and you get posts in there. If you want to do the super cheap $1 version, that gets you into the Discord, which is a lot of fun. Just starting to get that growing as well. And then there's a few other layers, but one of the more important things is that there's a couple layers where you can do a once weekly call. We actually just did the call this morning. We have them every Saturday morning, morning here, evening in Europe, depending on where you are. And you can pop into that, and if you sign up for that layer, you got 4 of those a month, and we chat about stuff, Q&A. This morning we were talking a lot about marketing and promotion and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. So if you'd like to join the Patreon, it definitely helps a lot, especially with all these new changes and being totally mobile and moving around. It's definitely a big plus, and definitely all the stuff that I do here is supported by the patrons. So if you want to sign up for the Patreon at the link down below. So yeah, so besides that, we are going to talk a little bit about the how I've changed up my setup over the last little bit, which is what we've got going right here. Move it so while we get the camera to turn on. Yeah, let's see, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, so I'll just switch that off. Anyway, so the setup, let's see what we've got here. So the big view is the modular rig, lots of changes here that we'll be talking about, and even more changes to come, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. I have added the Toneberg to my live setup, and we'll talk a little bit about how and why and what I'm doing with that. And the noise height drop, which is controlling the Toneberg, the Oxy sequencer, which is controlling, kind of sequencing everything as usual. That hasn't changed and probably never will. And also have the Oxy E16 controller over here, which I'm going to be programming to do some different things. But we'll go a little bit about how the changes have happened and why, and what we're going to be doing for different shows coming up. Yeah, so we'll go over those today. So let's see, sounds lovely, awesome. Hey, what's going on, Marcellus? Good to see you there from Iceland, from out in the countryside of Iceland. Let's see, what else do we have here? Herbie, what's going on? Great to see ya. Christoph, awesome. Good to see everybody. And again, thank you guys very much for joining in. It's great to see you all back again. So let's go over a little bit what's going on. So we have, one of the big changes that is going to be happening is I'm going to be traveling a bit in Europe and playing some shows. So I needed a rig that can be flexible, movable, but super powerful, because some of the shows that I'm doing are a little bit special, and we'll talk a bit about that in a little while, about this new project that I started up. But the rig that we have going on right now, the modular is, you'll recognize some things from the past. The Bohm obviously has been in here for a while, Archer's rig, battering ram. This whole upper section is actually going to be what comes with me to Europe on this trip, and the lower section is actually mostly mixer and effects and some other modules that I use when I'm playing exclusively modular. But for this trip, we're going to be adding in the new Board Brain Exelon SL standalone mixer, which if you watch my last live stream, we talked quite a bit about that. And we're going to have the final model at Superbooth, so you'll be able to take a look at it if you're coming to that. But I'm going to be using that for my shows there as well. So that's going to kind of replace this lower boat of my modular, because it does what this does plus a lot more. And so modular wise, I'm just going to be bringing the upper boat. And so that's why I've kind of focused this in on the specific voices that I want and the specific things that I want. As you can probably see, if you've watched some of these streams, there's actually quite a few changes with the with what's going on in the, even in the voices that I'm going to bring. So Bohm, battering ram, Archer's rig, those have been around for a while. But I do have a couple new voices. The Michigan Synthworks SY0.5, which is a single voice of the Syncussion. And that's actually being sequenced not by the Oxy, but by the Doepfer A155-2, which is basically like a DFAM sequencer, but you can use it to sequence anything. And so it's 8 steps, but you can control how many steps it is. And then you've got unquantized knobs for dialing in the pitch per step within that. And then you can switch from 1 octave, 2 octaves, or 4 octaves. So you can get some really interesting sounds. So let's see what we've got here. Get this one started. Take that kick out for now. Let's see, where did I have this running into? That's pizza. This is, yeah. Sorry, just patching this up right now. There we go. So this is the SYO 0.5 right now. So you can hear kind of lower octave, but it does have a 2. Has a filter. This is an LFO that can go into audio rate. All right, so as you move this up, I've got this going audio rate, so it goes a little bit weird. Makes things sound a little crazy. But if you want to do some just kind of like normal modular bloopy stuff, this is great. So you've got your 8 steps here, but you can activate or disactivate or deactivate steps. You know, and if you want to keep them all together, then you can change up the pitch. And this is on the 1 octave version. If you switch to 2 octave, and then if you go to 4 octave, maybe add a little reverb to that, and then maybe a little delay. And what's cool with this too is that it's really quick and easy to change up the number of steps. So you can just hold this and you put your first step and your last step. So if you want it to just be 5 steps, or if you want to change that up and have it be 3 steps, or have it be 7 steps, or back to 8 steps, however much you want to. So it's really quick and easy to change it around. So I just wanted kind of like a rogue voice that wasn't in the super quantized world of like step sequencing and Oxy and things like that. So to be able to have a voice that could just go kind of a little crazy and kind of off the rails in a performance, it's nice to have sometimes something that's a little unpredictable. So that was one of the reasons why I went with this. And I really love this sequencer. It's very cool. I wanted to play around with that idea, and I was happy because it does exactly what I was hoping it would do, which is that kind of like weird off the rails thing. And the same thing with the SYO 0.5 is that because it's not easily quantized, because the pitch is very kind of touchy, and there's all these kind of touchy functions and modifications you can do with it. It's a great way to get something really unusual really quick. So that's what that voice is for. And yeah, so again, wanted to have something a little bit odd, so that's where that was. Still have the pizza going through the Javelin and the Carbon, which is still one of my favorite voices. I did add in the WMD clutch, which I had added in before. I think when I did my last stream I had it already, and I'm using that for percussion. So yeah, that one is let's see, where did I have that? Actually, I'm not sure. I don't think I have that one plugged in yet. But anyway, I'm in the middle of patching right now, so that's why things are a little bit of a mess, and I'm trying to figure out what's going where and how I'm going to organize this for my shows. But the big addition is the Shockmount Ballista Blast. This thing, I played this for the first time at Superbooth 2 years ago when they had a prototype there, a working prototype. And it is... It was great then, like to the point where I tested it out at the show, said to the guys right away, I need one of these as soon as it comes out. And they've taken the last 2 years to really dial it in. And one of the things that Shockmount is so good with is that they did this with the battering ram, the Archer's rig. They really dial in their modules so that no matter how you set it up, no matter what the settings are, it's going to sound good, right? You can just kind of randomly twist knobs and bring up your volume, and it's going to sound good. Like, it may not sound exactly like what you're looking for, but it will sound good. And you know that you've heard me say before that the battering ram is nothing but sweet spots. Well, it's kind of the same thing with the Ballista Blast, but with multiple engines, multiple sound sources, multiple types within those sound sources, and every single one of them just sounds crazy good. So we'll go over that one in just a minute because I want to go like a little bit more in depth on that. But the Ballista is crazy to the point where I'm toying with maybe putting a second one in my case if I could make some room for it, because it's so good, so crazy. And then my two effect sends I have here in the case as well, Desmodus Versio for my reverb, and then the Ghost for multi effects. The Ghost is actually going to get swapped out before this trip because I'm getting a Cosmic Debris from WMD, so that's going to go in this spot here. But same idea at the same time, that it's like a multi effects send, so I can use it as a delay, a reverb, a combo. It has some kind of cool kind of like scatter splash effects. So yeah, that's the point with the send effects. And then another addition that I have in the case here that I didn't have before is the Trivium, which is the Weston Audio Travarsi collab, which super cool module, because basically what it is it's everything for a full synth voice without an oscillator. And so I keep it in my case in case I get an idea that I want to add something else. And there's a lot of my voices that have multiple oscillator or multiple outputs from the oscillator. So like the Pizza has an octave, a main, and a pulse output. I can run any one of those into the Trivium and then gate it from its own sequence, and it becomes a whole other voice with its own envelope, with its own filter, with its own everything built in. The Ericsson's bassline is also great for that because it has a separate output per waveform. So you've got like a square, a saw, and a triangle output. So you can take one of those outputs and just run it into the Trivium. Or you can take any output from any oscillator and just mult it and send it to the Trivium, and you've got a whole other voice. And if you have a little mixer in your case, you can send different audio sources to the mixer, mix them together into some new sound, and then send that into the Trivium, and then you've got a whole new voice. So it's a very, very cool voice with a lot of control over it, which is great. And again, like full of sweet spots, which I'm a huge fan of. So let's check in the chat and see how everybody's doing. Hello from Luxembourg. Awesome. Christoph just bought tickets for Superbooth. Amazing. What's up, James? Good to see you. Todd from back in Denver. Good to see you on here. Yeah, the SY 0.5 is it's a cool module. It definitely is. It's something very, very cool. The Doper sequencer is kind of new. It's funny, like Doper's so funny with the naming. Like they name like A155, like it doesn't have, like everybody else has these like weird names like Desmodus Versio, and then they have like A155. So they used to have an A15, or I think they still do have an A155 8-step sequencer exactly like this, but it's like 40 HP just for an 8-step sequencer. And so I would never have put that in my case because it just takes up so much space. But just recently they came out with this A155 V2, which is a 12 HP vertical version of it rather than the big 40 HP horizontal one. And yeah, it's awesome. It's really amazing. It's another one that if I had a bigger case, I would probably put a couple of those in the case because you can get some really interesting stuff out of it really quick. And again, it's fast and it's a bit, off the ranch because it's not quantized to anything. So it makes it very, very interesting. So yeah. Been missing the live streams. I've been missing the live streams too. It's been, I've been chomping at the bit to get back on here. And so it's great to be back with you guys. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Let's see, where's the Exelon SL? Any news on pre-sale? So the Exelon SL that I had before got sent back because they needed to take apart the insides in order to be able to make some modifications and test out some new modifications. So the two prototype models are back at BoardBrain. They're making the final versions. So much so, I'll show you guys this because it's a little bit crazy. I was texting with Adam from BoardBrain, and he was finalizing the circuit for the final production board. And just to show you guys, this was the drawing that he sent of the circuit. That's how crazy the circuit is in this device. So yeah, it's pretty bonkers. But he's got that all, getting that all finalized, and we'll have the final production models at Superbooth, and I'll get mine a little bit before, so I can play a couple shows that I have pre-Superbooth with this setup. So again, what the setup will be going forward is this modular boat with the Exelon SL mixer, Oxy 1, Toneberg, Noisite drop, and then for a couple of the bigger shows, I'll also have the TR1000 that I'll be playing. So that'll be like my big expanded setup, and then I can reduce it down as needed. I made the setup, the whole setup modular, rather than being, you know, everything in one modular case, so that I can swap out different pieces and parts of the entire setup depending on the show that I'm playing and on the style of show. I actually have a show coming up in on April 24th where I'm going to be doing you know, my usual like fully improvised live show, but it's going to be a open to close set at an after party, which will be a 6-hour solo improvised set. So I wanted to be able to get a setup that gives me lots of options, lots of things that I can do for that amount of time, so that I don't run out of sounds, run out of ideas during my live set. So it'll be crazy. Let's see, how's the drop integration going? Great. It's funny, I spent hours the other day like sitting in silence just staring at stuff because I was so like basically blocked on how I wanted to set everything up, because with a device like the Toneberg or the drop or the Oxy or with modular or with the E16, all of these things are so flexible and they can do so many different things that it's like sometimes you have to sit down and kind of plan out how you're going to use them and what you want them to do, because otherwise you'll just like start randomly setting things up and you'll go down rabbit holes and then it won't make any sense and it'll be just confusing. And so it's good sometimes to just say like, I don't want it to do this, I do want it to do this, I want this set up here, or I want this to do it this way. So basically I'm going to have the drop for this trip controlling the Toneberg, which if you want to break your brain, go online and look up the MIDI CCs for the Toneberg, because even though it's an 8-channel device, it has the possibility to do subtracks of 8 tracks per channel, so you can go up to 64 tracks. Every one of those subtracks has a whole bunch of controllable parameters. Then there's buses, routing buses that all have controllable parameters. Then you have effect sends, you have your main mix, all sorts of things. So like the amount of controllability in this with the ability to control of the drop is just like mind-blowing. So that's where that's been unique, and that's kind of what I've been setting up over these days. And we'll go over in just a minute how that's all been working. So yes, finally I'm back. Finally, it feels so good to be back. Let's see. Seen the mega one before, but the small version looking sweet. It is, and it's like it's exactly the same. I don't know why they had to take up 40 HP with that other one. Like it was gigantic to do 8-step sequencing, and this one is beautiful. Like 12 HP, fits perfectly. Yeah, it's a very, very cool one. So I love it. Let's see. Hola, what's going on? Who will you be collaborating with during Superbooth? Any gems with Underdog? Actually, I don't think that Oscar is going to Superbooth. I think he is going to be performing in Canada at the beginning of May, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, I don't think he's going to Superbooth. So what's going on at Superbooth? Well, that's actually a great segue to real quick talk about a new project that I launched in January, which is called Prediction Cycle. And if you're familiar with Store, it's a similar idea where it's multiple artists that are all playing live, improvised together, writing music live in the moment. But where it's a little bit different is that it's not just big name artists. It's collaborations with people that are local to whatever scene. With myself, I've been doing them also with Alex Anderson from WMD, and so we're mixing it up. We're bringing in different people each time, and we'll be doing one of those Superbooth weekend or Superbooth week, the Thursday, May 7th. At a place called Mahala in Berlin, which is a big old power plant that they've converted into a giant event space, kind of like Berghain or Kraftwerk or a bunch of those places, but it's a little bit out of the city. It's actually really close to Superbooth. You can walk there from Superbooth. And we have a whole basement room that has the former sound system from Panorama Bar in Berghain, which is a 20,000 watt custom turbo sound system. And it's going to be amazing. And that show, I will be playing with Veria Aves, who is a friend of mine from Berlin, Travarsi, Alex from WMD playing under the name Joseph Anders, which is his new techno moniker, and Maidon is going to be joining us. So it's going to be an awesome group of people. So if you go on to Resident Advisor, there's a pre-sale ticket link. If you have, if you're going to be at Superbooth and you have a Superbooth ticket, you get a discounted price for the entrance. I think it's 15 euros without Superbooth or 10 euros for Superbooth attendees. And that's going to be a 5-hour, 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Collaborative live set, improvised live set with everybody improvising live, nothing prepared in advance, no tracks, no rehearsal, no nothing. We'll be synced together and playing off of each other, playing off the crowd, getting all sorts of improvisational inspiration from the crowd. So should be a very fun one. Let's see. Recently traded out the Digitech 2. It's really interested to see how you're using the Toneberg. Well, that's a great segue. Let's talk a little bit about the Toneberg. Go to my overhead view where you can see the Toneberg a bit clearer. So Toneberg is 8 tracks, but each one of those tracks you assign a different engine to, depending on how you want the track to act. So kind of like with the Octatrack, you could have like a flex track or a neighbor track or an audio track or whatever. You can, a through track, you can do all different types of tracks. Same with the Toneberg. And one of those types of tracks that's really interesting and unique to the Toneberg is subtracks, meaning that like right here on track 1, I have, let's see here, I have this set up as a subtrack, meaning that on one track I have 8 one-shot tracks. Basically, the way the analogy that I like to use is it's basically like putting a Digitact 1 on a single track. So each one of these tracks, if you take a look here, each one of the tracks has its own source. It's got velocity, length, velocity, re-triggering, conditional triggers, all that stuff. Then you have different play modes like forward, reverse, whatever, individually by subtrack. You have your main kind of performance filter, and then you also have the second layer bass width filter, like all the modern Electron boxes have, and that's per subtrack. Then every subtrack has its own filter envelope, amp envelope, its own overdrive, its own panning, and then you have the 3 effect sends, and the mix or the mix routing or the bus routing is by track, not by subtrack. So all of the effect sends for this one will go to all of the subtracks. And so because of that, because you share effects and you share bus routing by the main track and not on the individual subtrack level, that kind of dictates the way that I have my my Toneberg setup. Okay, so let's see here. We've got okay. I want to make sure I didn't blast you guys out of here. So like for my first track, I have this set up with track 1 on the drop. So that's set up for a kick. And so what I did with this is I set up, so let me take a step back here. Track 1 and track 2 are both set up as subtracks. Track 1 is set up as my low end drums. And the reason why I have this, because yes, I have drums in my case and I'll also have the TR-1000. I wanted to set this up in such a way that I can write on this without needing external drums. And so that if something was to go wrong in a show, you know, MIDI cable goes wrong, a power supply goes wrong, some device isn't working correctly, I have options as far as drums go. So that's why I set this up as drums. And I also set it up so that for a really tight, small live setup, I could play a whole show with just the Toneberg using this setup. So 1 is set up as low end. 2 is also set up as a subtrack, but as anything that's not low end of my drums and percussion. So because I have 8 tracks, what I did was I set it up so that every other track here is a kick drum. So we have a kick there, and a kick there. Some of them are the same because I haven't modified them yet, but the idea being that each one of those could be different. On the track next to it, so 2, 4, 6, and 8, I have what goes with that kick. So is it a rumble or a sub? So I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, kind of depending on what you're listening on. And the idea being that you've got on every, so on this whole subtrack, I have 4 different kicks and 4 different low ends, you know, subs or rumbles that I can mix and match. And then those are all controlled by one fader. So if I bring up this pair of kick rumble, when I bring this up, or if I want to swap out that rumble for this one, I can do that. So it gives me the ability, without changing patterns and without changing projects, to change up whole kicks if I want to. If I wanted to write a new kick pattern live, if we go out of mute mode and I go into record mode, and then I was like, this is on track 1, but if I wanted to go to the other kick, now you can see that this is more of kind of a broken beat. I don't know if you can see these on the screen, but anyway, I can do a new pattern on a different one, and then I can switch over from one kick to the other. So it just gives me a way to go back and forth or to move around without having to change project or pattern or any of that stuff. Then on track 2, this one is all set up as percussive elements that aren't low end. So things like rides, open hats, closed hats. These ones, I don't really have anything on. So basically it's 1, 2, and 3 are percussive elements. 4 is a clap, 5 is a like rim shot, 6 is closed hat, 7 is open hat, 8 is ride. And so the reason why I split them this way instead of putting a whole drum group together on one track is because of that processing thing I was telling you about, because I want my cymbals and claps and things like that to have reverb, for example, but I don't want my kick to have reverb, because and certainly not the same amount. And so what this allows is that I can have things here where I can adjust like my reverb send, I can adjust delays, I can add chorus if I want to, all sorts of things. And that's just going into my higher end stuff, and then my low end stuff stays clean, right, without those reverb sounds. Or if I want to, I can then go to my kick track, and if, let's say I wanted to add delay, I can have that be a delay just on the kick track, and then if I go to my higher end track, I can have a different delay. And more reverb. So it basically just allows me to process those separately. Now, I wouldn't have needed to do this if the subtracks could be routed to buses individually, but they aren't. The bus routing is only by main track and not by subtrack. So, for example, let's say you didn't want to use subtracks and you wanted to have a kick on one and a rumble on two, but you wanted to put those through a compressor. You could route 1 and 2 to one of the buses, and then you put a compressor on the bus, and that way it would compress those things. But you can't do that with just 1 and 2 in a subtrack without compressing the entire mix. And if you don't want to do that, if you want to process them separately, the best way to do that is to split them up between different groups of subtracks, if that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if this is making sense or if you have any questions about how I'm routing this stuff. But the idea being that now I have on 1 and 2, I have low end drums and high end drums that I can get a lot of flexibility with and with changing things around. And then on tracks 3 through 8, for those other 6 tracks, those can all be voices, samples. I'm really loving the new dual wavetable engine. The Wavefinder is amazing. The granular engine is super cool. So it gives me a lot of sound palette of things that I can do. And then also going through, and this is all on one project and one pattern of one project. But what I do then, once I have like all of my drums and percussion set up on 1 and 2 the way I want, I copy that pattern over to multiple other patterns. And then I'll just take tracks 3 through 8, those 6 tracks, and I'll swap out the sound palettes in those while I keep the drums and percussion the same. And then I use global mutes when I'm performing. So if I have like everything muted except for a hi-hat on pattern 1 and I switch to pattern 2, those drums are all the same, so the hi-hat's going to be the same, and it will be everything else will be muted because I'm using global mutes. But what I've done by switching from pattern 1 to pattern 2 is I then have all new soundscape in my other 6 tracks. So if you're familiar with the Octatrack and with parts, being able to switch from one to another allows you to swap out all your samples basically while still keeping going with your same pattern or your same project. And the other thing that I've been doing with this that's a little bit interesting is that if you sequence those tracks, track 3 through 8 from the Oxy, which is what I'm doing, I have it set up on sequencer 7 to be 5 lanes of melodic sequencing for those tracks, then it truly acts like parts, because with parts in an Octatrack, if you have a pattern in your sequencer and you switch parts, that pattern stays the same, but you just switch out the samples. Where with this, if I'm sequencing from the Oxy and I switch to a new pattern, I still keep my same sequencer, my same melody that I have sequenced, but it switches to new samples in the new pattern. So it's basically using an external sequencer with the Toneberg makes it act kind of like an Octatrack, except an Octatrack has 4 parts, and this gives you 16 parts by doing it with an outside sequencer. So, this is why it took me a little while to figure out exactly how I was going to set this up, because you have so much flexibility and so many options with these machines that you really have to kind of think through, how do I want to use it live? What's going to be the best use of this stuff live? And so this was it for me. So now setting up the drop with this, and we can go into the drop in a minute, but setting up the drop with the Toneberg allows me to not have to go into menus, not have to switch around too much between tracks and stuff. So then I really have all my control here, all my sounds here with sequencing here. And it just gives me a ton of flexibility. And it makes the Toneberg like a much better sounding, much more feature packed version of an Octatrack. Although it doesn't do exactly the same stuff, the way I'm using it is the way I would use it if I was playing like with a solo live set with just the Octatrack. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with the Toneberg, and then we'll talk a bit more about the other stuff in a sec. So if that makes sense, let me know in the chat if that's making any sense. Let's see. Wish I had a teleporter to get you to the show. I wish you did too, Todd. That would be awesome. Nice to see you in your new home and studio. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a temporary space for now, but it's yeah, it's pretty cozy, pretty nice with a lovely view of the lake. So yeah, I'm digging it. Let's see here. Totally digging it. Love the breakdown. Definitely been thinking of using a single set of subtracks for an entire drum kit, but the bus routing effects. Yeah, it was, and that was one of the things is I was like, oh, cool. I'll just use one track and have that be my drum kit. But then when I realized that I couldn't affect my, my claps differently from my kick, and so if I wanted my claps to have a whole bunch of reverb or a bunch of delay or whatever, then I would need to put that on the kick too, so it didn't make any sense. So then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to waste the whole track just to do that. And then I said, oh, well, I generally like to process my high-end samples similarly and my low-end sounds similarly, so I'm just going to divide it up like that. And then initially I had just a kick and rumble, and I had 6 empty tracks, and I was like, well, it's kind of a waste, but at least I'm getting the setup the way I want. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why don't I just do 4 pairs of kick and rumbles, and then it gives me again a super flexible, much broader palette that I can play from when I'm improvising live. So yeah, it's a little bit different way to use the Toneberg, but it works for me. And it's funny because like when I got the Toneberg at first, I liked it, but I couldn't figure out how I would use it for my performances, and so I sent it back. And then after a couple of updates, after it added the granular engine was a big one for me, and then a couple other things, I was like, yeah, I think I need to give this another look. So I got it back, and then they just came out with this new update with the wave engine, which is amazing. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy device. So let's go just a little bit here to show you. So if we go to track 3, so I have a maybe I didn't save this. Hold on a sec here. Nope, that is correct. And then make sure I've got my parameters correct in here. Okay. And make sure I'm going out. So I'm just going to assign a wave to this. That's why. Gotta love retrig. This is acting a little weird, but oh, that's why. Because the ARP is on Shows you that I've been playing around with a bunch of stuff on this. All right, so basically what I have set up here is, so on channel 3 I have set up so that there's a one of the wavetable engines. You can hear just if I put an individual sound. But then I can go in and if this lower track here is track 3, so if I unmute that, and then I have the control over this to now be able to go in and do my So now the sequence is coming from the Oxy, going in and sequencing track 3. So you can see we're in record mode, but there's no trigs on this now. And if I mute this track, it still plays because this mutes the triggers, but there aren't any triggers. So it's still playing from out here. But if I then go in here and I mute this track, now it's muted in here. Now what's interesting about this too is that I can go into this track and I can add, you know, a couple of things here. Let me pitch these way up so you can hear, so you'll be able to hear them in the mix. Okay, so you hear those two steps, and this is muted, but this is not. So now if I go over here and I unmute this sequence, the two sequences are playing together. And if I mute this sequence here, it's only this one and not this one. So then again, I can go in and mute and unmute. Now it's only this one and not this one. So what's really cool with this way of using this is this allows me to play around with different types of patterns and have them interact with one another and change them up and create variations. So I can have like certain parameters over here, like certain probabilities in the Oxy, have other steps here with different probabilities here that have things parameter locked. Another thing that you can do here is if you hold down function and hit a step, it'll be yellow, and that's a trigless trig. So you can tell this to change things without triggering a trigger. So while these triggers are playing, this can change things. This can change actions in this. So if you wanted to change up, you know, and parameter lock things, but without having an actual sequence to parameter lock to, you can do function with a step and then have it be a trigless trig. So there's a lot of ways to use the two sequencers together and the two devices together that gives you a ton of power with being able to come up with really creative, interesting stuff live. Because like the Electron's one place where they're a little bit challenged is they can't generate random pitch in key, which is one of the things I love about the Oxy. So like I can set, for example, if I have this pattern playing, let's say I just have a really simple pattern of this. Here, I'll just do these all the same note. Let's say I like this pattern, like put a kick drum like this so you can hear. And let's say I like that rhythmic pattern, but I want to randomly generate some pitch in key. So what I can do is I'm in, let's see, I'm gonna pitch this. So I'm in Phrygian E, as you all know is my favorite scale. So let's call that there. And then if I go into the random thing, I can just have it only do pitch, and I can do it within a certain range. So like, let's do plus or minus 4 semitones from the root note. And then if I hit random, and then if I hit random again, So you've got all the sound design capabilities in here, but you can do your random generation over here, and you can keep generating randomly. If you want it to go crazy, let's have it do, I don't know, plus or minus 21 semitones. But it allows you to still keep your same rhythmic pattern. So this way you have control over gate, you have control over the rhythm of what you're doing, but it gives you the ability to add in stuff by generating random pitch. But it keeps it within the parameters of how far do you want it to drift away from the root note, plus or minus, and how random do you want the notes to be, and all of that stuff. So you have control over the randomness, but you can use it to generate random ideas very quickly. And then you compare that with other things that you do in the sequencer here, and then you have two different layers of sequencing, and then you can kind of mute and unmute those to change up the different patterns, and they can interact with each other in different ways. It's also a cool way to transition, is you can have one pattern coming from this sequencer, then you can put in a second pattern from this one, and then take out the one from this one. So you can kind of add in notes and then take out the original notes, and it gives you a way to transition over to a new idea by using an external sequencer with an electron box. And this works with any of them. There's a really old video on my YouTube channel about how to write bass lines, and I did this exact same technique on the Analog 4. So you can do this on any of them. It just gets even more interesting when you're using something that's as interesting as the Toneberg. So anyway, let's see what else we have here. The new Wavefinder is massive. I agree, it sounds amazing. Do you also have the pots on the drop set for the Toneberg tracks? I will, I don't yet. Yes, so right now I'm just setting up, I've been just setting this up over the last few days. I was originally just gonna use the E16 with this for this trip, but I decided in the last few days that I wanted to use the drop because I wanted faders, specifically for what I'm doing here. So if I'm not going to be using the TR1000 for a show, I can have these be all faders. I'm going to set up a preset so that these faders would all be drum tracks, set up just like what we were talking about. So like tracks 1 and 2, and then clap, snare, and all of that stuff on different sub tracks will be controlled by these different faders. Then the knobs, once I have everything kind of laid out, then the knobs are going to be used to control sound design parameters, so that I don't have to go into individual pages to do that. And I again am still mapping out exactly how I'm going to do that here. The other thing that's crazy with the drop is that every fader, every button, every knob, even the click on the knob, everything can be assigned to up to 8 destinations. So every button, every knob, every fader can be a macro. So that gives you a whole other layer of, okay, well, do I want an individual filter cutoff for every channel, for every filter, or do I want one filter cutoff that goes to all 8 channels, so that I turn one and it becomes a master cutoff rather than having to route them all through a master filter, if that makes sense. So you have a lot of options when you're using something like the drop, just because of the macros. And the Oxy does that as well. You can build macros on here. The Oxy is actually really super fast for building macros on the fly. You can hold one button and then select a few other things, and then that one knob will control those things you just selected. So it's a really quick way to create macros on the fly. So, but yeah, again, gives you a ton of flexibility to do all the things. Let's see here. Any news on the Exelon SL mixer? Yes, the news is that it is, everything's being finalized. All of the new upgrades from the demo version, from the first versions that we were showing at Buchla and Friends, all of those changes have been made, and getting the final boards printed so that we will have final production models at Superbooth for everyone to see and play around with and mess with in its kind of final form, the way it's going to be, because we had to get new enclosures because we added some new functionality, different switch, move some things around a little bit. So yeah, that's going to be, that final version will be ready at Superbooth, and we'll have our pre-sale getting going right about that same time. And then they'll be shipping this summer. So you'll have them in your hands very soon. Very, very soon. I know not soon enough because it's such a cool device, but very, very soon. So yeah. Let's see. Let's go a little bit more to the modular, because I wanted to show you a little bit more about the battering, or not the battering ram, the Ballista Blast. This thing is crazy. I can't see this one super well. If I tip it up, it will be blinded by the outdoor sun. I have to rethink this. Maybe I'll put a block back there next time. Anyway, the Ballista, which you can see right here with its expander, which is next to it. Two different modules. The Ballista is basically a all-in-one synth voice that has a bunch of different digital sound engines that oscillators that drive the sound, and then different versions, different configurations of each oscillator. Then it also has all the rest of the things for a complete voice. So it has a built-in filter, envelope with multiple destinations, which can be looped and put out as an LFO, pitch control that can be locked and then used as an octave switch, and different parameters for each one of the voices. It also, everything besides the digital oscillators, everything else is analog. So analog filter, it has an analog distortion built into it, which I'll play for you in a second so you can hear. And then, yeah, all the rest of it is all analog. And then in the FM, yes, in the FM mode, it has a low pass gate mode, and you can swap out, I think it's just in FM, might be in all of them, but you can swap out the filter for a low pass gate, so whichever you prefer. And then in the modulation section, it's kind of cool because you have an envelope here that you have control. You can set it as an AD, an AR, or looping, or I can't remember the other version of it. But then it's assignable, so it basically, it always goes to the, well, I shouldn't say always. If you turn it on in the settings, it will always go to the VCA. So it will always be an amp envelope. But then the other destinations are in addition to that, and you can assign it to one or more of those other destinations at the same time. So it's not just a single envelope or a single LFO or however you have it set up, but it can be assigned to these 4 different parameters that are over here, and then you've got a depth control and decay for the envelope and attack for the envelope, and so it can be assigned to 4 different destinations plus the VCA, and then the expander is basically this, but another one. So then you have another LFO or envelope or whatever you want to use it for that can also, it just connects to the back of the module with a jumper. So you can then send all of that modulation to those destinations too. So in this little module, so you've basically got a 12 HP module with a 4 HP, so 16 total HP. You have a classic engine, which is kind of like classic subtractive synthesis, a wavetable engine, and an FM engine, filter, low pass gate, envelope, which basically is 4 envelopes plus the main envelope, the amp envelope. And then in the expander, you have another 4 envelopes or LFOs or whatever that are all assignable to those same destinations. So a ton of power in a relatively small space. With a lot of really cool hands-on control. So let's just go through this just a little bit. I'll take this out of here. All right. So where are we at? I'm going to take the effects off so you can just hear the voice by itself. So you can hear that it's kind of like short decay, and it's got some movement that's coming from one of the LFOs here, and the filter's all the way down. And this is classic mode. And then open up the decay a little. And each one of the synth modes, or each one of the synth engines has different modes. So this is the classic engine, and right now it's in sub mode, which means that we're blending the main oscillator with the sub oscillator. So if I take that sub oscillator out, and then if I start to blend that back in, that's kind of half and half, and then it goes to all sub oscillator over here. And then you have your depth of your envelope here. And then in this classic mode, there's two different waveforms. You can either be a saw or a square. So this is the saw mode. And then if I hit Alt, it switches it to square. And then again, you have to blend between square sub, square by itself, or both together. So that's the sub mode, right? I'll go back to the triangle wave here. So that's the sub mode, but there's a lot of different modes per voice, right? So besides the sub mode, you have dual mode, which is dual detuned oscillator, and the parameter now, put this in the center and they're doubled up here. Unison, which again, typical unison, so you've got multiple voices, and then the parameter is the spread of those voices. Back together, and then all the way back. So, super saw or super square. Sync, which is two synced oscillators. And again, this is all with no effects, right? Add in a little reverb. That's the sync voice. Then you have width voice, which this widens out your voices. So if you're listening in stereo, you're going to do this. Center, or broadens them out. noise mode, where the parameter blends in your oscillator with noise. And then you have a chord mode. Here for this one, I'm going to take this, I'm going to clear out the sequence, and I'm just going to put in a single hit here. So you can hear the chords a bit better. So as you turn the parameter, you change chords. So you have minor chords and variations on the left and major chords on the right, and then it goes to like dissonant chords. And then this is all your minor, major. And then it gets into dissonant. Again, these are sawtooth, but you can also do square. Right? And that, all of that is just the classic engine. Right? So now, let's change, oh, you have an octave switch as well, so you can go up and down octaves. So this is our classic engine. Now let's go to the wavetable. And again, in the wavetable, you have 8 banks of 8 wavetables. So you switch banks here with the buttons, and then you switch wavetables within the banks here. So this is Digi 1. This is chip, so actually it's not 16 banks, it's not, sorry, 8 banks, it's 16 banks. So this is chip 1, which is like chip tunes. These are formant. And these are highly harmonic. these ones are vocal. And then you have basic wavetables, which is basic waveforms. So if you want to use your like normal kind of traditional, you know, square, triangle, whatever, you've got those in the basic wavetables, right? And then we go to the FM voice, which I'm going to turn everything down first on this before we get started because. So with the wavetable voice, the harmonics and emphasis and parameter all become different control. Sorry, not the wavetable, the FM voice. Those become all controllers of different parameters depending on which algorithm you're using, and there's multiple algorithms. So. And again, all of these things are all modulatable using the internal envelope or LFO. So for example, right now I'm using the LFO of the expander to modify the harmonics. Okay? And I can turn up the depth of that, and the speed. As well. So now it's controlling the harmonic and the emphasis. And I can control the parameter, which is the pitch. Actual pitch control. So you can set this up to do some like subtle movements like this. Over time. And again, just one algorithm. Switch to another FM algorithm. So as you can see, like there's just endless sounds with this thing. So it's been amazing. I've just had it for a few days, and getting this put into the case has just kind of blown me away. So can't wait to use this a ton more in other situations, in other scenarios. So it's a pretty awesome voice. And one thing that really got me about it as well is how it cuts through a mix. So here, let's go to classic sub and just. hear how clear that comes through. In the mix, it's something that you can hear really clearly and really well in the mix. You can hear it's really playable as well too. So to be able to have that much control over dynamics and sound shaping and envelope and decay lengths and things like that, all in one little module, really immediately, is something that's amazing because it gives you a lot of ability to play it as an instrument, and it's not just like set it up and then hope nobody touches any knobs and they don't knock it out of place. This is something that's just begging to be played, right? It's begging to be, messed with and touched and played around with. So yeah, it's been an amazing voice. So anyway, any questions? Let's jump back in the chat, see if you've got anything that you have questions or comments or anything about that. So let's see. Almost like a Monumatic, kind of. A bit different. Monumatic focuses a lot more on the filters and the different types of filters. That's where its real strength is. This one, it's really about the voices and the modulation within it. And the filters are basically very simple. You've got, you could switch between 4-pole, 2-pole, band pass, high pass, low pass. You could switch between those. But within the Monumatic, there's a lot of different filter types, which give it some really cool character. This one, it's all about the oscillators themselves, the voices, the modes, and the controllability, and the modulatability of those voices. So a bit different from the Monumatic. Let's see here. I'm thinking about swapping out my Syntact and Analog Heat Plus effects for the Toneberg. You could use the Toneberg effects as sends with my mixer and also use other tracks for other sounds. Not sure if that's possible. Maybe. So it doesn't really have sends routing. So the sends are the same for the entire device. but you do have insert effects for each of the channels, including the buses. And if you have outside audio coming in, which there's a stereo input, you could route that through a bus and have two effects that you could then route through if you wanted to do that. Yeah, that would be possible for sure. So anyway, is it stereo? It is. So it is a monophonic voice. Yes, it is a mono voice. Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. It is not stereo. Snappy. Yes, it is. The envelopes are killer in this thing. Like, they sound amazing. Really sound really good. I might have to swap out the Percon's voice for that shock bot. To be honest, I am not going to have the Percon's voice in this case, and I have the shock bot in this case. So that's where we are. Let's see. Perfect sound for a rainy afternoon. Yes, it is starting to rain here, which is beautiful in this place. So I will warn you that sometimes in the rain, the power cuts out. If that happens, the stream will abruptly end. But in the meantime, we'll keep going. Let's see here. Just tuning in from Dublin. Awesome. So we're using the Toneberg. Yeah, the Toneberg is very different. It's like the way I'm using it is very different. I'm not using it polyphonically. I'm not using the multi-sample engines. I'm not, like, none of that stuff. So probably unlike the way you've seen anybody else use it, I'm using it in a totally different way, but with some of the really unique stuff that it has, like subtracks and the routing options and things like that. So yeah, Toneberg is a beast. It is a total beast. Yes, fresh head shave for the stream. You're right. I did that this morning. Referring to use the inserts plus buses to route. Yes. So basically a track coming from inside the device has two inserts and three sends. The three sends are the same across all the voices, but the two inserts are unique by track, which is really cool. Then each of the buses has two inserts as well. Unfortunately, one of the things that I asked the Electron guys, hopefully they'll do it in a firmware update. Unfortunately, you can't route from one bus to another bus. I'd love to be able to layer buses, so that way you could have, like a performance effect or two, and then have maybe, I don't know, a compressor, like whatever you wanted to add, but being able to put those together, you can't. So right now, if you route something through a bus, it goes from that bus to the main mix bus. And when it comes through that bus, you've got two inserts that you can put on it. And the list of inserts is impressive. Like the new effects in this sound outstanding, like really, really great. So yes. Yes, exactly. Stack two effects and sends, and then you can send it out another output. Correct. Yes. How are you using the insert buses on the Toneberg? So I'm actually just building my Toneberg model, my Toneberg template right now. So I'm not using them at all because I split those, the low end and the high end of my percussion into two tracks. And since I split those two, I was able to use the inserts on those. So I haven't needed to then layer on extra inserts. But that's one thing that's really cool, is that I've got two inserts per track. Then I can route that track to a bus where I have two more inserts. Then I can route that to the main mix out where I've got an additional effect, and then it goes out the main. So you can, in effect, even with, like, excluding the sends, right? You've got three sends no matter what. But individual signal path, you could have two inserts on a channel, two inserts on an effects bus, and then one effect on the mix bus. So you could actually have 5 things that you could put on one thing, plus 3 sends. So there's a lot of customizability. And the thing is that the effects that you can use on the effects buses are really cool. So you've got like chrono pitch, which is like a pitch shifter. You have a comb filter, a compressor, a daisy delay, a degrader, which is like a bit crusher kind of, a dirt shaper, which is also another one that kind of adds like character and extra kind of weird aliases to things. Then you have a filter folder, you have a filter bank, frequency warper, which is kind of another type of frequency shifter, flanger, low pass filter, panoramic chorus, a phaser, a saturator delay, steel box reverb, super void reverb, and warble. So all of those effects can be assigned as insert effects. 2 per channel, 2 per bus, one on the mix out. And they're not all the same. I think the mix out has a limited number of those effects. But for the most part, those are the effects that you can use, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility as far as what you can do with the effects and with the routing. That was for me. So when the Toneberg came out, there was kind of 2 big things that it did. First thing is it does like the polyphonic multi-sampling and all of that stuff, which is cool, but not for me. It's like not something that I would use in my performances. But the other big thing that it does, which is less sexy, but for me more interesting, is the routing. Being able to do this routing through buses. And if they ever get to the point where you can, which I assume they will at some point, where you can route one bus into another bus into another bus, then you can come up with whole chains of interesting effects that you could then assign to a controller and use those as performance effects or sound shaping effects during a performance or whatever. So you could have them kind of bypass at certain points and then bring them in when you want to bring them in. So you could come up with strings of effects, kind of like what EasyBot does with his performance template in the Octatrack. What most of those are is combinations of a string of effects being able to interact in different ways. And so if you could route from bus to bus, you could do something similar in the Toneberg, but not quite yet. So let's see. You can also send to external output. Correct. Yeah, there's actually 3 stereo outputs from the Toneberg that are all assignable. So you've got an AB out, a CD out, and then the headphone out. And those are all stereo and they're all splittable. So it can become 6 mono outputs as well if you want. So yeah, that'll be another cool routing option with this that not a lot of the other devices have. Why move to Mexico? New job, looks warm with the sun. We are in Mexico visiting family. My wife's from Mexico, and we're here visiting her family and staying in this beautiful home and using it as a time to get ready for a big trip to Europe for shows. So let's see. How are you using subtracks for percussion or just single samples? So I have a subtrack on 1 and 2. Subtrack 1 is kicks and rumbles. I talked about this a bit earlier in the stream, so if you go back and watch, you'll see. And then subtrack 2 is all non-kick and rumble percussion. So cymbals, percussive elements, toms, things like that. So I can process them separately. So I can compress the kick and rumble together, but then the higher elements I can send through reverbs and delays without having to use up all my tracks. I can just use 2 subtracks that way. And it's kind of like having a grouped bus for different types of drums and percussion. Okay. How does the chord mode map interval offsets to generate chords? I don't know if you're talking about the Toneberg chord mode or the Ballista chord mode. The Ballista chord mode, they're fixed chords. It's a mono voice, so it's basically just splitting oscillators, and they're fixed within the device itself. When you send to a bus, you get additional effects. Yes. Ever thought about processing incoming audio in the Toneberg for the effects primarily, but can you do live granular? Yes, you can go through the granular engine in the Toneberg as well, which is pretty cool. I think we'll see bus-to-bus routing as an option. I would think so too. I think that they need to, I think right now their big effort is trying to get the Toneberg set up with overbridge. And I think they don't want it to be any more complicated than it needs to be in order to go into overbridge. So that'll be a bit. Just join No More TR1000. The TR1000 is not here right now. It will be coming with me on the trip to Europe for my gigs over there, but I don't have it right now as we're here visiting family. I had limited space to bring gear, so this is already a lot for what I was bringing. So, but yeah, TR1000 is definitely still going to be a part of the rig. What other questions? If you've got other questions, pop them into the chat. Happy to answer, show something on my rig, show different things that I'm doing here, talk about the tour, the shows, upcoming gigs, marathon solo show coming up, prediction cycle events. I will do another shameless plug. There's a link down below to my Patreon. That's kind of the only way that I can support doing all this stuff now that we're completely mobile and traveling. So I would love if you guys could join the Patreon. There's a free tier, there's a cheap tier that gets you into just the Discord, and then there's one that where we do like weekly calls. Then there's one that includes one-on-one sessions every month. So yeah, definitely jump in there at patreon.com/Circo, and yeah, I'd love to get you into the Patreon. So definitely check that out. You can also use affiliate links that are down below as well. You guys know how those work by now. Everybody uses those, but that's also a big help. And if you're interested in any of my courses, I have an improvised live performance course, and I also have a hybrid production course that I would love to get you into as well. So if you're interested in either of those, also link down below, or you can go to circolive.com/courses and check out the outlines for the upcoming courses and get signed up with those. So I would love to see you in there as well. Let's see here. Waiting on the Toneberg, it's going to be awesome. It is awesome. It's an awesome machine. It was an awesome machine since the beginning. The only reason why I sent it back was because it wasn't awesome for my use case. Like, I didn't need all of the awesome things that it did. I wouldn't use them. But then they came out with a bunch more awesome things that are very much a great use case for me. And so yeah, so that's where we are. This new wavetable engine is a monster. And the granular engine as well sounds really, really great. And like I said, pairing it with the drop and pairing it with the Oxy One, with these three things, it would be super simple to do an entire live set just with the Toneberg, a controller, and a sequencer. I could do it just with the Toneberg and the drop as well, but the Oxy is just kind of like my comfort zone for working. And I'm actually thinking about setting up an Oxy template that's just a Toneberg template so that I can sequence my subtracks from here and do all of that stuff from here as well. So yeah, I think it would be pretty cool to be able to do that. So we shall see. What did I replace Archer's rig with? I didn't replace Archer's rig. Archer's rig is right there. And that I don't think will get replaced. Even though I have the TR1000, even though I can do drum samples on the Toneberg, the Archer's rig is just so playable. You know, I love to be able to go, here, let's take this out here, go back into Archer's rig. I love to be able to have the Archer's rig and just go, and to be able to then just open that up, filter, change tuning, you know, switch models. You know, super easy. Super easy to go through stuff. And then you've got the classics. Like for me, I almost always stay on this kind of like 909 mode just because I like the way it sounds. But just having that immediacy of control over a hi-hat's great. And what I do is on my sequencer, here, let me show you from the overhead view here. On my sequencer, if you notice, the third track up here is my hi-hat track. And I always keep that just looping on 4 steps because those tend to loop on 4 steps. And it makes it so that I can go from like an open hat to a closed hat really fast and back to an open hat because I only have to just change those 3 steps. And so between being able to modify the steps really quickly and being able to change up the sound really quickly, it just gives me a crazy amount of flexibility and immediacy. So I love that. The other stuff that I have in this case right now, drums and percussion wise, is obviously I've got the Bohm kick drum, which is just like for me, it's the best kick drum ever. Like I think it's just absolutely amazing. So we've got that. We have obviously hi-hats, and then I have a second kick drum over here, which is the battering ram. And the reason why I have it do a second kick is that I sequence these separately. So if you look again at my sequencer here, so the bottom layer here is my primary kick drum, right, which is the Bohm, and you'll see this step is only every 4 or 8. Yeah. So basically I have that set up to do as kind of like a turnaround, but everything else is just kind of 4 on the floor. The next level up is my battering ram. And so I have this so that I can visually look and I can see where I want to put other steps, and I can put them kind of in between steps of the Bohm kick. And then I can sound shape this sound all by itself. So if I want to make it like tom sounding without much click, medium decay and medium drive, then I have volume control over just that. And if I want to make it longer, or I can make it super low. Again, having control over just this voice means that, like, let's say I wanted that lower one to have a long decay, I can put it there, but if I want it to be short, I can make it short. Now, why is that important? So what you would normally do if you wanted to do this in your setup is you would do this all with the same kick, and you would program in other kicks with different velocities. And that accomplishes kind of the different volume levels or the different velocity levels of the kick, but you don't have the same sound design flexibility over the 2 separate kicks that you do when you have 2 kicks like this. So this way I could make, again, I can make my main kick super punchy or not punchy at all. And then I can bring in my secondary kick. And let's say I wanted, for some reason, the secondary kick to be super punchy, without changing the other kick. So you have individual shaping over those. So you can keep this and you can pitch tune them. So again, it just allows you a lot of flexibility to be able to control individual elements. And for me, that's one of the most important things for improvised live performance, is that you need to have really immediate control over all of the parts of individual elements in order to be able to really shape. Because when we're doing improvised live performance, not only are we writing the music live, but we're also mixing and mastering the music live, right? So we have to be able to have a really clean mix. And we're not putting every single thing through, multi-band compression and dynamic EQs and sidechain compressors and all that stuff, because we just don't have the ability to do all that individually in an overall setup. So we need to be able to, instead of EQing a whole bunch of tracks or your mix, we need to be able to EQ by going into certain frequencies and changing the characteristics of those frequencies to make them fit in the mix. So as we're listening and we're playing live, we're listening to the mix and we're making adjustments on the individual sound level in order to be able to make things fit. As an example, when we're talking about kick drums. So like if we've got a 4 on the floor kick drum, and I'll just do just the kick here. So right now we're at 140 BPM, right? So at this BPM, this length is great, this length of kick. But if I was to slow this down to 120 and have a really long kick, hear how you kind of lose the kick? Because you're canceling out part of the second kick with the first kick because they're going over the top of one another. And as you speed that up, it gets worse and worse, because as those kicks are coming faster, you need to be able to shorten down your length of your kick so that that kind of boomy tail of the kick is finishing before the next one hits, right? So at a lower tempo, you've got a lot more space, but at a higher tempo, that space shortens up, so you have to be able to shorten up your decays. And so the same goes for having other elements like the secondary kick, being able to have the individual control over shaping that sound, the length of it, the pitch of it, the volume of it, allows you to really fit things into the mix properly so that you don't have to, you know, clean up a bunch of messes with processing that we just don't have in a live set. So anyway, let's see here. Cross-bus routing might blow up overbridge. Yeah, I think that's probably why they're not doing it right now. So no replacing the Archer's rig. Can the Toneberg do transitions or performance options for live play? Yes, although for those of you that have watched a bunch of these, you're probably laughing right now because I get asked about transitions all the time. I don't transition because I don't prepare anything before my set. So my sets are completely written live in the moment. So I start my set with blank sequencers and I write everything live. So I don't have a track A that I have to transition to a track B, right? So for me, that's not important, but you can do that. I mean, you can do that with any device. It's just a matter of coming up with skills and ways to do that. You know, I'll give you an example. If I wanted to transition from this kick that I have right here to the kick that I have over here in the Toneberg, and I was playing something like, let's say that this is my context and I wanted to transition from one type of kick to another, I might do something like, I might filter out so that you don't really hear the kick, and then I might fade one kick out and another kick in, and then when I bring this filter back out, now I have a different kick. I messed up my track by adding some delay before. So, but you see that you can, there's tricks that you can do. Like again, you filter out. And now I'm back to the kick over there. So there's ways that you can do that on an individual element basis, which is always the way that I would recommend. Coming from the DJ world, transitioning from one track to another, what you're doing is you're using your multiband EQ to take out certain frequencies as you bring in frequencies of the new track so that you can make that blend really smooth from one track to another. When you're playing live, you don't need a multiband EQ because unlike when you're using an entirely produced finished track when you're DJing, when you're playing live, you have individual control over individual instruments. So in a DJ set, if I wanted to take out my low end or like transition over the low end from one track to another and then move over my mids and then move over my highs to make it really smooth, I would need to do that with EQ, right? But here I can actually go from one kick to another kick, or go from one hat to another hat, or one lead to another lead. So I can actually transition the entire instrument. And so that's always how I would recommend it, rather than trying to find a smooth way to go from all these instruments to all these instruments, right? That there's just never a smooth way to do that. That's just like, again, if a DJ had two tracks and they just basically said, I'm gonna go from this one to this one, and you just kind of jam it across, and it's not smooth and it disrupts the dance floor, even if they're beat matched. So with this, we have the ability to individually morph sounds. So that's the way that I would always kind of recommend doing that kind of stuff, and setting up your devices so that it can do that, rather than setting your device up as a production tool and then trying to shoehorn that production tool into a performance method, right? Meaning, for example, I wrote an entire track on one pattern or project of the Toneberg. Now I have to figure out how to get to an entirely other track. Or you could say, okay, within my patterns, I'm going to set up these tracks so that I can go, that I can take out track 1 and bring in track 4, and that moves me from one bass line to another bass line, right? And so I would say it's really important for transitions to kind of set things up in advance, and the more you're performing live, the less you need to transition, because the less preset your tracks are, and the less preset things are the way that they're going to sound. If that makes sense, right? And the other thing that's beautiful is if nothing is preset, nothing can be a mistake. Anything you do will just be part of the show, right? And it won't mess up something because nothing was predetermined. So I always love that part of it. Let's see. Didn't recognize the analog rhythm. Oh, the Archer's rig with the black panel. Yeah, I have black panel Archer's rig, black panel battering ram, and black panel Griffin's claws. They don't make a black panel yet for the Ballista and its expander, but as soon as they do, I will get those. I'm all about the black panels. Where are we at? Sequencing, yeah. Quick Oxy track breakdown would be greatly appreciated. Sure. I will. Yeah, so the way I have my tracks broken down in my Oxy, yes, we are in the overhead view. So track 1 for me is always a multi that's drums and percussion. So right now I'm only sequencing the Bohm, the battering ram, and the Archer's rig here. When I have my full thing set up, then I also have Percon's voice and then any other percussive elements that I want set up here in this section. Track 2 is always kind of a primary voice for me. So for a long time, that's always been the pizza. So that's what I have on track 2 right now. And that's set up as a mono voice. Track 3 is now the Ballista Blast. It used to be the BIA, but I took out the BIA to add in the Ballista. So I've got that space. Track 4, 5, 6, I actually don't have anything on right now. I don't know why that has a trigger on it. 4, 5, 6, I don't have anything on at the moment because my case is only about half patched. But that's generally where I would patch any other individual melodic voices patched as a mono voice. And then 7 is going out via MIDI to the Toneberg. And, so as I mentioned before, track 1 and 2 are drums and percussion on the Toneberg. So now this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the bottom 6 tracks of this sequencer in a mono mode are the 6 kind of tonal melodic tracks of the Toneberg. So again, as I was showing you guys before, take these out. Guess I can leave that kick drum in there. So yeah, so track 3 on here. Let's see here. Yeah, track 3. Yes. Doesn't have any triggers on it, as you can see, and this track is muted here, but if I take the mute and I unmute this track, then I will get, theoretically, oh, maybe if I bring up the volume it will help. So that's this sequence going into track 3 over here. So if I go in here and if I change the pitch of these, so again, all of the sound design capabilities in here, but sequencing from out here. And then if I want to have another sequence on this pattern, this goes back to the conversation we were just having about transitioning. If I want to transition to a different pattern on this, I can then start adding in notes over here. And then I can mute these ones over here. And I've just got these two notes that I added in. And then if I want to, I can mute track 3 here, and it will only mute those steps. And then I can unmute this one at the same time over here, and I can just change from one track to another. Now I'm using the sequence from here. This sequence is muted, or I can put them together. If I wanted to get something that was more interesting. Using this external sequencer with the Toneberg gives you a lot of possibilities to be able to make those changes if you choose to do that. So yeah, so that's my rundown of my tracks in the Oxy. I have 909 brain, so I like to see 16 steps left to right in lines. And so that's why for me, I like multi-track sequencers and mono sequencers. Monos are kind of like a piano roll. So you've got like gate across and note up and down, and if it's set to a scale, you've got your scale there, so you can just kind of randomly throw stuff down. Where this gets really cool is, let's go into here. Let's go back to our Ballista voice. So like this is the sequence for the Ballista. So if I can just put in a couple notes. But because this is a mono voice, I know that if I like this rhythmic pattern, right? If I like this rhythmic pattern, but I want it to make it more melodically interesting, I can just go up rows to make different changes. Like that, you've got melody, right? Because this is already set to a scale, so I know that any note that I use vertically is going to be still in the same key. But where this all starts is putting in a rhythm that I like, just like on a single note, And then if we go back to our Archer's rig. So again, that's just all on one note, so it can be kind of monotonous, but this is where you can say, okay, I like the rhythmic elements. So again, I can just either put notes in to change that. And this is something you can play live. So you can change those up live. Or if you want, you can go into your randomness here, and you can turn the density all the way down past 0, and you get to some other options, and one of those is pitch. So if I just take that pitch and I say, you know what, I want this to only go up a maximum of 3 semitones from the root note, still in key with a randomness of 25%, and then I press randomize. Hit randomize again. It keeps my same rhythmic pattern that I really liked. And let's say I find one that I like, but there's one step that I don't like. Right over this video. So you can always go in, so you can generate randomly, and then you can always go back in and make modifications. So that's one of the reasons why I love setting up the Oxy this way, because again, 909 brain, I like left to right, I like 16 steps, and I like step sequencing. So this way it gives me the ability to do those things that I can keep very clear during a performance. And if I shift from one voice to another, I just need to know which voice is which voice. And I keep notes, if you can see, probably can't see very clearly, but I'll have these labels aren't correct because I'm just changing things up, but I'll put down the name of the voice by channel on these pieces of tape, and then I'll also put which track it is in my sequencer, so that I know if I'm using this voice, I can look here and say that's the pizza and it's on track number 2. So then I can go to track 2 and I know what it is. So I'm leaving myself like little breadcrumbs for when I'm in a performance, so that I can find those things that I need to find and don't have to worry about it. Okay. All right. Tap tempo delay is a classic. Yes, it is. It is. Did you already talk about the new shock mod? Yes, I did. And it is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Blew me away. Crazy good. So much so that I want a second one in my case. Let's see. The Libra Legio is not in my case. So I took the Libra Legio out because so no heat and no Libra Legio. I have the Polydactyl Versio, which is in here right now, which is basically 3 Libra Legios in one thing. So it's like 3-band compressor limiter, which I don't use the compressor, but the limiter per channel I do. And then it has a saturator, which I always use. So that's on my main. So I will multi-band limit and saturate on my main out from this. However, when I go on my trip, this whole lower case is not coming with me because I'm going to have the new BoardBrain Exelon SL mixer, and the sound quality of that mixer is such that I don't feel like I need an output module. I may at some point, if I find space in my case, add this back in just to run through, but there's not any easy way to run through it. So I'm just going to use the output the way it is, because the sound of the module itself is great. And so this is really like having an end of chain is really kind of unnecessary. Like it's always nice to have saturation if you can, but again, not necessary. So it's an extra thing for me that I don't necessarily need for my shows. So yes, and I'm not getting the Golden Master. So yeah. As you can tell, Marcellus took my course recently, and one of the things we talk about is that as an end of chain, what you actually need is limiting saturation and low end mono. So most of my voices are monophonic anyway. I can mono those tracks within the mixer, within the Exelon SL, so I don't have to worry about that as far as output. And then the only thing I would have to worry about is like getting some low end messiness from a reverb, but the Desmodus Versio that I use has a tone control. So I can take the low end out of the reverb anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'm not too worried about it. I shape the sounds rather than having to clean them up afterwards. And that includes mono of those sounds as well. And then what else? Saturation. I wish I did have. I wish there was a saturation circuit. Maybe we'll sort that out at some point. Maybe I'll get a pedal. I'm not sure to run through. And then limiting, I don't really need, because one of the cool things with the Exelon SL mixer is that there is a compressor per channel. And as you will have heard me rant about before, I'm not big on a compressor on your main output. I think that's a bad idea for live performance. It's decent for sometimes for production, but for live performance, it's a very bad idea to have a compressor on your main. And so the cool thing with the Exelon SL is that there's a compressor, an analog compressor per channel. And so it's very cool because you can actually tame all of those things that you would normally limit by channel, by voice, by input, before it ever even gets to your main. So then all you really need to do is gain up. And there's plenty of headroom in this mixer. So being able to set those levels correctly and then gaining up on my main is all I really need to do with that mixer, because there's a compressor per channel. Which you don't have in this mixer, which is why I have the multiband on the output. So it's kind of like having 3 compressors or 3 limiters on the output to be able to limit by frequency band. But when you have a compressor per channel that you can kind of set almost like limiting per channel, then you have, because there's 8 channels, you can do basically, it's like having an 8-band multiband limiter compressor, because you're doing it by each channel, so you don't need to have it on your main, because again, compressors on your main for live performance is a very, very, very bad idea. Just so you know, if you haven't been on these streams before, this will be the first time you hear that. If you've been on the streams, you've heard me say that all the time, so nothing new. So anyway, other questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. Been going for a couple hours, but happy to spend some more time, show you anything else you want to see about the setup or any of that stuff. So have a look at the Doppio from 3-Tone Modular. Yes, Doppio is very much like the Libre Legio. So it's a great saturator for your output. Yeah, it's great. I'm the Doppio, the Libre Legio, the Polydactyl Versio. I'm a big fan of all of those on your main, because what you really need to make your main output sound good from modular is saturation. Because modular outputs, modular mixes in live performance in particular, tend to sound loud but thin, because they're very clear sounding individual voices with not a lot of the space between them taken up. So your mix doesn't sound full and mastered, like finished. And so if you can saturate that that mix, that output, then you get those spaces in between the frequencies filled in with musical sounding harmonics with saturation. So I love it. So again, it's for me, it's the most important thing to have on your output is saturation and limiting if you need it, right? Yes, it is smaller. The Doppio is only 4 HP, which is cool. And the Libre Legio 6 Polydactyl is obviously 10, but it's multi-band. But yeah, the Doppio is a great option to have on your output if you need it. Again, and you may or may not need it. It depends. That's again one of the great things about this new mixer, that Exelon SL mixer, is that the things that the mixer does means that you don't need to do a bunch of things in your modular rig or in your hardware setup that you would have normally had to do. So I don't need to have saturation because I have an analog drive per channel. I don't need to have a limiter because I have a compressor per channel that I can use to limit peaks so that I can then get more headroom out of my volume. So it gives you way more control in a much smaller space for way less money if you do that within a mixer like the SL. Because here, if you're doing something on your output, it's kind of like using a machete instead of a scalpel, right? You're gonna saturate everything the same, or you're gonna limit everything or compress everything, which is why compressors on your output is a bad idea, because you're doing everything the same. When you can do it per channel, the way we have it set up in the Exelon SL, then you've got, with that analog drive circuit, that takes the place of the saturator, because you're adding harmonics using an overdrive rather than a saturator, but they do similar things, right? Distortion, overdrive, saturation have a similar impact, but in different ways. Wavefolding as well. Similar impact, but using different methods. But you can still get that same saturated sound by adding drive. And then with the compressor per channel, that takes the place of the limiter that you would have. And basically you're able to set those peaks on a per channel basis rather than one thing at the end trying to catch something that was messed up earlier on. So being able to go through a mixer like that is key, because not only does it take the place of a bunch of stuff that's in the case, but it also does a lot of things that it would be size and cost prohibitive to do in modular, or even in hardware, like with pedals, external devices, routing through different things. It becomes a mess. So this way you can kind of put it all together in one mixer. So that was part of the logic behind creating that mixer in the first place, was to be able to do that. All right, what else? What other questions do you guys have? Or what else do you want me to show that I have in my process of being in the middle of setting things up right now? So it's only like half patched and half built and half assigned and all that stuff, but I wanted to kind of get you guys into the middle of this. Yeah, and just to let you guys know a couple of other things, we do have shows coming up in Europe around Superbooth. So May 7th, our prediction cycle kind of store style multi-artist collaborative event is going to be May 7th at Mahala, Berlin. And that's going to go from 9 to 2 a.m. And then May 8th, I'll be playing at Akud, I think it's called, which is a kind of a gallery, warehousey gallery space, where I'll be playing the Raw Industries show with Snakes of Russia and Joseph Koons and Varia Aves and Alex 106 and Tomo and Analog Kitchen. I think that's all, but I might be missing one. I can't remember, but that'll be Friday, May 8th. And then we may have something Sunday, May 10th as well, but that's still up in the air. So keep an eye out on social media and everything for that, and I'll let you know if that show's happening as well. I really like to test the standalone Exelon, but I also like the idea of have it all in the case. The Eurorack Exelon is too big. Yeah, there's something to be said for having everything in one case and not. For me, the idea of having everything in one case was ease of travel and all of that stuff. But the reality is, because this mixer is so feature packed and small, that it's going to allow me to eliminate half of my modular with something that's much smaller than that half modular. So it's actually going to lighten up my travel and give me more space for things than I would have with having everything in the case. Now, having everything in the case is great because you can roll up, power one set of outs and you're done and everything's patched. That's great. This is not that much more complicated because I have just 2 power supplies, and then everything in my case is patched except for the audio outputs. And I can actually leave them patched in my case and just take them and plug them right into the mixer, and then we're good to go. And my effects send returns, and that's it. So it's still a pretty easy setup. Definitely not as easy as just opening the case and turning it on. But I like the idea of having a smaller, more flexible, versatile, and way more capable mixing solution than trying to jam everything in the case. I love my Exelon mixer in my case, and I would still play whole shows with just this case and nothing else. But having that new mixer and its capabilities, the things that it can do, you just can't do in modular. Certainly not in that amount of space, and certainly not for the price. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, the modular approach of different boxes. Yeah, so there's like the modular, and then the whole setup is modular because it can come and go, and I can add the TR-1000, I can take out the Toneberg, I can add in a 1010 black box and take out the TR-1000 and just play modular or whatever. And being able to have one mixer and one sequencer kind of at the center, sequencer to push out control and mixer to bring back and perform signals. Having those two pieces for me are the most important bits in the live show. So let's see. Sorry for the repetition for you, but why is compression and end of chain bad for live? Because, so basically, if you think about how a compressor works, you have a threshold which triggers the ducking of a signal that goes beyond that threshold by a certain ratio of amount. That's the settings on your compressor. On your output, so let's take a step back. If you're producing, you have basically, let's say 5 minutes of audio. So on your master, you may put a compressor because within that 5 minutes of audio, you've got a certain palette of sounds, you've got a certain, dynamic, you have certain dynamics of loud and soft that you're going through, and you have certain effects that you're using and things like that. And it's about 5 minutes worth. So you can put a compressor on the end of a production and find an average setting that will help you tame peaks and bring up lows and kind of get that mix to sound better in a lot of cases. When you're playing a live performance, especially an improvised live performance, you have no idea ever what combination of voices, how dynamic you're going to be. Every time you add filter resonance and do a filter sweep, you're changing the frequencies, you're changing the level of certain frequencies because resonance gives a boost of level as you sweep through frequencies. So every time you do that with any differing combination of different voices during a performance, your peaks change, your quiet moments change, your the amount that you would want those things adjusted would change. So the only way you could effectively use a compressor on your master output in a live performance would be if you or somebody else was constantly adjusting, threshold, ratio, makeup gain, all of that stuff in order to make it even things out. And the counter argument to that is usually it's like, well, I just put a little. And it's like, okay, well, a little will work for a very limited number of things over the course of a whole performance. And you're probably better off just making sure that your mix is good for those few little things. Because if you use more than a little so that it's being active more often, well, then you're probably crushing things at some point so that you can catch peaks at another point. So you're probably making things sound worse as often as you're making them sound better. Right? So people want to spend, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars if you buy the stimming box on having some master output compressor that you're going to use so little. In order for it to not mess up your mix in a live performance, you would need to use it so little that you might as well not even have it. It's just a waste of money at that point. Now, this is where a lot of advice that's online that you see for electronic music is really geared towards production and not performance. Because in production, having a master bus compressor makes sense. Again, because you're only dealing with 5 minutes of audio. So you can find that middle ground, you can find those moments where it's really important. And if you're doing it in a DAW, you can adjust during those and build in automation and have it really work well for you. But in a live performance, live performances are so dynamic, not just in dynamic range, but they're dynamic with like big bigs, major changes to lows and all sorts of things that there's no way to have a real compressor setting that would be effective. So in the end, it's just a waste of money. Or if you're not wasting the money so that you're actually using it, it's probably making your mix sound worse as often as it's making it sound better. So like with my students, one of the first things I tell them is if you have a compressor on your main for live performance, take it off and learn how to mix, learn how to adjust your mix and choose sounds and volume level mix and perform your performance in such a way that you don't need something expensive at the end to catch mistakes that you've made. And it's not that complicated actually to do all of those first things. It's way easier to do it right at the beginning than it is to try to fix it at the end, right? So that's the long soapbox about why having a compressor in your main is a bad idea, because it's either a waste of money or it's making your mix sound worse as often as it's making it sound better. And most often it's not changing anything. So then you're just wasting money. So that's it. Let's see. Raw Industries Berlin, Superbooth. Yes. Snakes of Russia, Tomo, Varia Aves, Joseph Kunz, Alex 106. Yep, that's it. There we go. What case is that? This is the Morph Modular case, which is a 14U84. And I can't close it all the way because I have these outputs here, but this top part folds down and it closes up and has a handle. You can put it in a case, or it also fits inside a rolling carry-on so that I can take it carry-on for travel. So that's what case that is. What else? Any other questions, comments, anything else you'd like me to show, explain? Wow, I think my image is getting all blown out here because it's so sunny. Let's see if this helps. There we go. Much better. Now you can see things a little better. Sorry for that. I didn't notice. As the sun starts coming in the window, it blows out all of the visuals here. But yeah, so now you can see things better. Apologize for that. What else? What other questions do you guys have? Switch up views here. So again, this is more or less, this is turning into my live setup for the shows that I have coming up the end of this month in the US and then in May in Europe. But basically this lower case is not going to be here. This is going to be the Exelon SL standalone mixer. I'm just going to bring this upper case with voices. I am going to swap out a few more things in here, which I'll show you as I do them later on. And so it'll be this, the new mixer, Oxy 1, Toneberg with the drop controlling it. E16 controlling some things maybe, but I haven't decided yet. And then TR1000 as well, just because I love it. So that is that. Any gig plans in Spain? Trying right now. I have a couple in the works in May, like late May, early June, but still not 100% certain. But as soon as I have certain dates, I will definitely post information on my socials for everyone to see. What else? Any other questions? Yeah. I just wanted to show you, I was so excited to show you guys this Ballista because it's such a cool voice. That's another way that I love to use the Oxy, by the way. Using the random generator, and then you've got undo and redo. So what I did was I pressed to get a new pattern, and that changed it up to this. And then I can play around with this. And then when I want to drop back in, I can just do undo and go back to my old pattern. And if I want, I can generate a new one, or I can do shift redo. And then undo. So it gives you a way to, and you can do that through multiple things. So like if I do redo, and then I generate a new one, and then so you can do, on the fly, you can come up with different sections of a track. So if you wanted to do like A section, B section, you can do that really easily by doing an A section, randomly generating a B section, and then undoing back to the A section, right? So it's a really easy, dynamic way to do that with the Oxy One, and it's one of my favorite ways to play the sequencer. So yes. E16 have a future in the setup? Yes, it does. I just haven't figured out how yet. I think I'm going to get a MIDI to CV converter, and I'm going to use it to control some modulation stuff in the modular case. Because I won't need it really to control anything in the Toneberg, because the drop can control everything. One of the things with the drop that's kind of crazy is, you know, as if the stuff I already told you wasn't crazy enough, but it's crazy that it has, you know, 8 faders, 8 buttons that can be assigned to whatever, 32 knobs. Every single button, fader, knob, everything can be a macro to go to up to 8 different destinations, and each destination can have different min-max, different what do you call it? The name totally just went out of my head. So you can set different curves. So you can set like linear or exponential or whatever individually by destination. So like one thing can go to 8 different things and be a macro, and each one of those destinations can have different min-max, different curves. You can also invert. So like as you turn a knob one way, it turns 3 things up and 5 things down at different ratios that you can set. So because this is so crazy, I don't need the Oxy for this. But the other thing that this does that we didn't even talk about is all of that stuff that I just told you is layer A. And then if you hit layer B, you have a whole second layer of all of those same things again. They can all be completely different. And you can set up your faders to either be different, control different things in layer A or layer B, or you can set them to have the faders all be the same and have layer A and B only change the knobs and buttons. So like, for example, if you were going to use this as your drum kit and have like all of your drum effects or your drum like levels all set, and then you switch to layer B, these are all still your drum levels, but these are maybe all now, you know, synth controls or controls over a different box. Like this can, you know, layer A can control the Toneberg, and layer B could control, I don't know, an Octatrack or a D-Tact or a TR-1000 or whatever. And so, and it doesn't even have to be by layer that those control. Like layer A could have like, you know, 6 buttons that control the TR-1000 and, you know, 28? 28? Yeah, no. 26 that control the Toneberg. Right? So, and it can be totally different. You can set it up flexibly any way you want. But with that much control, I don't really need the E16 because I need this because I want the faders. So this gets first. But I have the E16 here because I may add it in for the modular because it's so small and the control is so good. And being able to build macros live on the fly is a great function of the E16. So yeah. How is the Bone Performer performing? There have been some complaints. I have no complaints. I've loved it since I got it. I think it's amazing. I mean, basically the way I use it is, if we go back to what I was just playing here. So the performer itself is my volume for my kick, obviously. I have the one effect, change view so you can see here. I have the one effect in the performer set up as a DJ high pass, low pass that only affects the kick. So if I turn that on and I high pass, I can high pass my kick without affecting my mix, because with my Oxy Meta, this is the entire mix. So if I high pass here, I'm high passing the kick, but also the entire mix, where here, it's only the kick. So it just gives me a little more control. And then the duck is my entire mix, except for the kick, obviously, is going into the boom, and then coming out of the boom into the meta. So what I can do is, this is easier to hear if you turn the drum down. I'll turn this up bigger so you have more sound. So you have this kind of big wash. The duck is set up as a side chain that goes to the kick. So as I turn it up, you hear it like getting crazy. That's like maximum. But then you can turn that down and have it just be subtle. And then you can bring in the kick. So depending on how dramatically you want to do it, but that's where the Bone Performer is being used for me, and I love it. I think it's been great. Interesting though, with the Exelon SL mixer, the Bohm is no longer going to be my side chain. So I was almost going to take the Performer out because I didn't need it. But I actually came up with another idea, since I don't need my kick to be side chained, because the Exelon SL has an assignable side chain. So you can assign any tracks, and then it has a duck knob basically like this. The same as here, but you have a lot more control over the compressor, and it sounds really good. So because of that, I won't need the Performer, but what I'm going to do with the Bohm is instead of running it into a channel in the SL, because I don't need it to be side chained or any of that other stuff, I'm just going to actually run it into one of the returns for one of the insert effects, and then use the volume fader on the Bohm for the volume, just like I do anyway in this version of it. So that way it frees up a track in the mixer, so I can use the tracks for other stuff. So yeah, it's the inputs from the two stereo inserts and the two stereo effect sends. If you're not sending something out them, you can just use the input as an additional input. And there's a gain trim knob on that input level, which is great. So yeah, that's how I'm going to be doing that. Let's see, what effect sends are you using with the new Exelon mixer and the new setup? So I'm going to still use this same case. And so my two sends are going to be the same as my two sends here, more or less. Desmodus Versio is going to be my FX1. And FX2, here I'm using the Ghost, but I'm going to swap out the Ghost to try out the Cosmic Debris from WMD. So I'll be getting that right before my next show, and that's going to be swapped out in there. So that's going to be my two effect sends. The cool thing with the Exelon mixer, the SL, is that both Effect 1 and Effect 2 are pre-fader, or can be pre-fader. So with these ones, only Effects 1 can be pre-fader. And I love using pre-fader effects. Like, it's one of my favorite things. If I was to take, for example, like, I love to start shows like this, where I don't bring any of the sounds in, but I start to bring in just full wet reverbs. So you can see that I have no faders up, but I'm getting this kind of atmospheric sound. One of my favorite ways to start shows is like this. So this way I can get and then you bring in the kick. And still nothing up. So this is why I love pre-fader effects, but I can't use the Ghost pre-fader because Effects 2 can't be pre-fader. So then I would need to bring in a track. And then I can start to send to the Ghost. Right, but you can only do that that delay send post fader, so the fader has to be up. And on the Exelon SL, both of those can be pre-fader, so then you can do delay and reverb pre-fader effects and build these crazy, awesome washes and yeah, all that cool stuff. There we go. So yeah, those will be my effects. I did consider, and I'm still considering this, I may at some point get an Eventide H90 and use the H90 as my two effects sends, because the H90 has dual stereo inputs and dual stereo outputs, and you can run two algorithms at once, and you can change them during performance, which is really cool. So I could have effects 1 going to one, effects 2 going to another, and I could set up different presets where I have these two, and then when I want to change up the mood, I can switch to two different effects, or you can change them individually during performance as well. So I may at some point do that, and that would free up a little space in the case to add something else in here. But for right now, I'm still going to use the modular effects as my effect sends. So my favorite kick engine on the Bohm, I actually use the FM one a lot, the FM2X, and I use the PX3 and the SP6. Those tend to be the ones I go to most. The ones that are powerful but not too kind of distorted, overdriven. I like the powerful, punchy techno kicks, but not the overdriven gabber hardstyle kicks. So those are where I get the best sounds from those ones. So just got the Portail from EOWave as a MIDI to CV. Interesting, because that is exactly the one I was looking at, because Morph Modular, let me see if I have that here somewhere. Oh, did I put it in the case, maybe? Oh yes, this one here. So Morph Modular has this unit docker, which is for switching regular 3U modules to 1U by turning them on their side. And most of those only go up to 4 HP, and then there's like a little space left over. They built this one so that it fits 5 HP, and the Portail is 5 HP. So my idea was to get one of those and put it in here sideways, so that it would save me some space, but it was a great use for my 1U row because I don't have any good 1U stuff. So anyway, Portail looks very interesting, but I haven't got it yet. Let's see, looking seriously at the desktop version of the mixer, is it going to be mass produced? I don't know what you mean by mass produced. It will be broadly available, if that's what you mean by mass produced. They will still be made by hand in Richmond, Virginia, in the US. All the components obviously come from China, like everything else does, and then they're hand soldered and hand assembled in Virginia. So it won't be mass produced like in a factory on an assembly line, but it will be mass produced in that they will be widely available. As they will sell as many of them as they can sell. It's not going to be a little boutique thing that we make like 10 and then nobody can get them and whatever. The idea is to have them in Toneberg and Perfect Circuit and Sweetwater and Schneider's Laden and everywhere. So yeah, they'll be widely available. Let's see. Cosmic Debris looks very interesting as well. And first thought it was a competitor to Ghost. Yeah, it is very much a multi-effects unit. It's exactly the same size as the Ghost. A little bit different in the layout and a little bit different in the way it works. Definitely different the way it sounds. The kind of scatter modulation, kind of interesting effect stuff that it does is a little different than the Ghost. The Ghost is very much delay, reverb, filter, overdrive, compressor, distortion. Like it's very much those things. And this one has some unique kind of algorithms in it that make it do some kind of super trippy cosmic things. I guess that's where the name comes from. So yeah, but it definitely looks very, very cool. How'd you do the MIDI connection directly or with a separate MIDI distributor splitter box? Did you discover common issues? Let me see if you were asking about a particular thing. Well, rather than, if you want to clarify that in the chat, please do. Otherwise, I'll just show you the way that everything is run MIDI-wise. Everything is controlled from the Oxy. The Oxy has an HDMI output right here, which goes to the Oxy pipe, which is in my modular case. And that brings 8 CV and 8 gate from here into the case, but it also brings clock and reset. And that clock and reset from the pipe, I have going into the PAMS Pro Workout clock and run. And so that becomes my clock distributor. So then I have multiple clocks from there going out, clocking the Dopever sequencer, clocking the Bohm groove, clocking the delay on the Ghost. What else am I clocking? I know I'm clocking something else and I forget. Oh, the clutch. I don't actually send sequences to the clutch. I just send it 16th notes from the clock, and that, here, let me see. I know I have. I've got some patch cables here just so I can patch that. I didn't have the clutch output patched, but I'll go ahead and patch that now so you can hear it. So basically, what I do, take off all my. There we go. So where did I put the clutch? In 6. So this is the clutch, and it's way overdriven. So I send the clutch, this is straight 16th notes coming from a clock into the clutch. But the coolest feature for me about the clutch is the feel, it's called, which is kind of like the groove pool in Ableton. So you have these different feel engines. So right now this is straight 16ths, but with this accent feel pattern. And that's what I love the clutch for, is for creating groovy percussion just from 16th notes. And so like if you add a kick to this, see, you get like really interesting stuff. Then if you start to add in like delays to it. And then what's cool with the clutch is that you can load in your own samples. So I loaded in a bunch of percussion samples instead of hats. So I don't really use it as a hat. So. Is that that's one pattern, but then you just hit the switch and then you can cycle through different feel patterns. change the input at all. This is still just straight 16th notes. But then you can change through your samples, you can pitch them, or you can add decay. And then I have the second engine, which is the fixed hi-hat engine, just on the noise hat. So if I want to add noise to my samples, I can add noise to get some additional effect. And then you start adding in delay. And all of a sudden you get these really cool, funky, groovy patterns just straight from that. And so you can quickly change up the sound and change up the pitch to get some really interesting stuff as well. So you just get a lot of interesting stuff out of the clutch, and so that's where that clock's going. So anyway, a little off topic because you were asking me about MIDI. So first of all, that's how all the CV is getting in here, including CV clock. Then I have one USB-C cable. Here, I'll show this again. One USB-C cable coming out of here, which is going into the Noisite drop right there. And that's bringing clock into the drop. And then the drop has the ability to split the clock into multiple outputs. So there's 4 MIDI and 2 CV outs from here, as well as 4 MIDI ins. So what I'm doing then is I'm then going out from the drop via MIDI into the Toneberg. And then within the drop, I'm merging my pitch and gate information from the Oxy that's coming in via USB with my CC information, like fader control, that's coming from within the drop. There's a MIDI merger built into this, multiple MIDI mergers actually. So I can merge those signals and then direct those out this particular output to go out to the Toneberg. So that way the Toneberg gets pitch from here and gate from here and CC from here and clock from here. And the clock is going through that same connection as well. So that way this clocks the drop and the Toneberg, but through the drop and through merging those signals, if that makes sense. So it's a very simple MIDI path because it's one USB cable into here and one MIDI cable into here. And then all the complicated stuff takes place inside the drop. And that's where I do the MIDI merging, and I can take out different channels, and I can filter MIDI signals. I could split the MIDI signals to go out to different outputs. So if I had other boxes, so if I had another synth or electron box or whatever, I could have that go out a separate MIDI out, and then I could direct, you know, one channel from here through this to go out to that box, while 3 channels from here went through this out to the Toneberg. So all of that is going on inside the drop, and all of that is saved in here rather than being saved in the destination device. If that makes sense, okay? So that is MIDI path. With separate MIDI distributor splitter box. Yeah, so this is why with everything going in through the drop, because it has such complex merging and splitting and filtering capabilities for MIDI, it allows you to do all of that stuff just in one box. So, yeah. My favorite. I'm going to change my exposure here to, there we go. So much sunlight. All right, so let's see what else do we have here. Yeah, you don't need the Kenton box if you have the drop. This has basically 4 Kenton mergers and 4 Kenton dividers all inside this box. The other thing that this has, and I have to give these guys a shout out, Thomas at Noisite is a genius, and I wish more people were smart enough to do this. One of the things this has, let me see if I can tip it up to show you guys all the inputs on the back. There's a couple of really smart things, but every in-out MIDI pair has a switch to switch between MIDI A and MIDI, like TRS A and TRS B, right? Which I wish more people did, so you don't have to change up and use different converters and all that stuff, which is great. The other thing that's very smart is all of the writing on the back of this is upside down, because you're almost always patching these in a live performance, like before a show, by looking over them from the top so you can read them from the front side on the back. You're never looking at it from the back. So by flipping these, it becomes way more usable for the way you would exactly use it in a live performance. So shout out to Thomas at Noisite. You're a genius and your gear is amazing. So yeah. Why does the clutch sound like a dolphin? So I don't use the clutch as a hi-hat machine, and I never have. From the time I got it, actually, even before I got it, I was playing around with Alex's from WMD before I got one, and I was like, he said you can load your own samples, and I was like, oh, well, then I don't need a hi-hat module because I love the Archer's rig, but what I need is a percussion module that has immediacy and groove. So I just loaded in a bunch of percussion samples. So that's why everything that you're getting here, so I can change between. And it's all pitchable too. So one of the coolest things about the clutch is that you can load in all your own samples. And that's just one bank. You have 8 different banks of 8 samples that you can load in. So you can load in, like if you want to have a bank of, industrial percussion samples and another one of like live recorded one shots of real congas and timbales and whatever, you could load that in. And so as a percussion machine, the clutch is amazing. Like amazing. I'm going to close curtains here really quick. Yeah, there we go. Get you guys a better view without a bunch of sun glare. There we go. Yeah, so that's why it sounds like a dolphin, if that makes sense. Where are we at? Drop is incredible for all the MIDI routing possibilities. Have you talked with the timed drop features? I don't know if that's something that I'll use. I may find myself using it, but that's not, again, like as I mentioned before with the Toneberg, and I mentioned about the Octatrack and a bunch of things, just because something can do something, it doesn't mean you need to. I like this because because everything can be a macro, because you have 2 different layers, which gives you 16 faders and 64 knobs and 16 buttons that are all assignable, and every single one of them can be a macro. That's why I like the drop. And for all of the MIDI, CV, and USB routing that you can do, and that you can save all of your devices and routing and everything inside the machine. So then when you're building something new, everything's already built inside there. Those are the things I love. Now, saving presets and morphing between presets and using the drop functionality, that's super cool, but I don't know that I'll use it. I might at some point. I might go, wow, it would be cool to go from this pattern to this pattern. Sweet, I'll do that. But because I don't prepare anything, I don't see myself using that a lot, but I may. I may set up a pattern live and then save another setting live and then switch back, and move around between those things. That's a possibility. But I don't know, maybe not, who knows? But again, just because it can doesn't mean I have to. What else? Greetings from Iceland. Somebody else, there's 2 from Iceland on here now, at least. Herbie, what is the difference between MIDI type A and type B? Are there certain instruments? Yeah, that's the problem, is that these little connectors, one. Yeah, these little connectors like this, are either type A or type B. Some devices use type A, like, I can't remember which one uses which, but like 1010, this is a 1010 one that comes from a black box or a blue box, is not the same as the one that Oxy uses for the E16 and the Oxy One, right? So if you have different connectors, you may not be able to use them one with the other. When you have a switch, then you don't have to worry about the connection, right? You can switch the output or the input to match whatever you need it to match. So then you don't need a converter, which is amazing. Yeah, an amazing thing that I wish more people did. That's cool. Oh, I think you're talking about the dolphin sounds when you said that's cool. Yeah, I mean, the clutch for me is, I was actually talking to William at WMD, and I asked him, I was like, hey, could you just make a feel module that's basically just a programmable accent module that you could send to anything and send like, or have anything go through and have accents hit, and it would just be amazing. But with this, it's all built in. So for percussion, which is when I would use it most, I absolutely love it. Originally, it was set up to accent hi-hats because it's supposed to be a hi-hat module. But the way it works with regular percussion is even better. Like, it's just like, it blows me away. So, yep. Very curious about improvising live. What happens if you generate a new sequence and it sounds bad? How do you fix that and keep it smooth? You should take my course, because my whole course is about how to play improvised live performance. But what we talk a lot about in the course is, first and foremost, figuring out what you want to play and how you want to play it. Then building a setup so that you can do those things, so that you can not only play your instrument live, but so that you can make changes on the fly, so that you can easily do things like what I was just showing you here, right? If I build a pattern in my, so I can set in this sequencer, I can set this to a key. So that means that every single note on here is going to fit within key. So I can't do anything out of key. Then I can go to randomization, and I can set parameters of randomization to do a certain range and a certain amount of randomness, but still within key. So then I can generate a pattern live, and it may not be exactly what I was thinking of, but it's going to sound right? It won't sound wrong. It will be in key, right? And then I can generate another one and another one. And because it's only got that very small range, but if I change to a bigger range, and let's say that I generate this and it's not what I want more on the root note, I can just change a couple of them. And so I can do it quickly, but that comes from setting up my device in the beginning. Well, first of all, getting a device that's capable of doing this, then setting it up so that I can see my instrument the way I want to, so that I have the key already assigned, all of that stuff, so that at the beginning of a show, this is how I start, blank sequencers, and I'll just hit play, right? And I've got nothing going there. So I can, if I want, I can set a pattern, right? And have that be the beginning of my thing. And then I can generate random, right? Or if I want to, I can totally generate a pattern from scratch. But I don't like that because I don't like not having control over the rhythm. So for me, I want to just randomize pitch, right? So I can go in here and I can do what I did before and just do a gate pattern on one row, right? Or if I want, I can generate gate and rhythm by doing here. It never really sounds bad because you've got it quantized to a key, right? And so having a device that can do that, and having it set up in a way that can do that is one thing. Then when you're talking about things like modular voices or something like the Toneberg or other synthesizers, having things that not only are they made to dial in quickly on the fly while you're performing, that they have really good sweet spots rather than things that take a lot of time to dial in and finding a good spot. Those are all really important. Having immediate controls so that if a sound is kind of off, you can get it back in really quickly. And the last part about it is the part that there's no shortcut to, which is you have to practice a ton in order to be able to really know your gear, to be able to know what it will do, right? So like even for example with the Ballista Blast, this new voice that I just got, I can look at this voice and I can say, okay, if I have the pitch here, I know it's going to be relatively low, decay short, filter down, resonance up, and I'll be on the sub mode, so I'm going to blend in some sub. So I know more or less what that's going to sound like because I've played with it a lot to the point where I know what it's going to do. So this is going to be a relatively subby, filtered down, short decay, lower pitch sound, right? So now if I delete this and I go in and I just generate a random thing like this on that voice, listen, and it will be a relatively lower pitched, filtered down, short decay, dual oscillator, one being a sub and one being a main, right? And then if I open up the decay, right, it is just what I said it was going to be, right? With a relatively high resonance too. I can turn that down a little bit if I want, right? But you see, because I've practiced with that module, I know more or less what it's going to do without having to hear it. So when I'm playing live, I don't need to experiment around. I can dial in something and know more or less what it's going to sound like before I bring up the fader, right? And then I also do tricks, which I talk about in my course, where you can do things like pre-fader sounds, like what I was just doing. So if you've got other sounds playing, so if you've already got this playing and you're not sure about that bass sound that we were just talking about, you can bring it in just with the filter, or sorry, just with the reverb. Kind of hear it in there, and then you can bring it in. Right? So there's different ways to do it, but the question you asked was, how do you, if you bring in something and it's not what you want to hear, how do you change it quickly and it doesn't sound bad? The first way to do it is to not do it in the first place by knowing your gear well enough to know and putting things like quantized to key and having those sort of guardrails. And then the second part is knowing your gear well enough so that if something goes weird, you can quickly modify it and quickly change it, and you know exactly what to reach for, and you're not like kind of fumbling around looking for things. And that's another reason why one of the things we talk a lot about in my course is how to set up your gear so that you can find things, right? So when I set up, like, for example, a bunch of different patterns or a bunch of different kits of sounds on the Toneberg, I set them all up the same way, right? So 1 and 2 are always going to be low end, high end percussion, and then 3 to 8 are always going to be tonal things from lowest frequency to highest frequency. So that if I need something mid frequency, I can just go to track 6. I know that's exactly what it's going to be there. I may not know exactly what the sound is, but I know it's going to be the right frequency to fit into my mix. So I always organize things in a certain way so that I can find them. And that's probably the biggest kind of cheat to being able to play live, is to make sure you build something that is navigable easily live when you're in a stressed environment with people staring at you, it's hot, there's lights, the lights are flashing, it's dark. It's like being in that environment is stressful. So you have to have built something that you can navigate within that stressful environment, right? So what else? Hey, what's going on? Federico, Yalu Music. So you guys were asking what case this was, and I said it was the Morph Modular case. Well, Yalu Music Sound is actually Federico, who is the founder of Morph Modular. So he's the guy, and he's also a fantastic live techno performer. So yeah, he's the man that made this thing that I'm playing with right here. This thing that folds down and does all that cool stuff. That's his box. Okay. Let's see. How's the Travarsi module? It's awesome. I talked about it a little bit earlier already, but it's really cool because for me, it's a way to recycle sounds that you already have, because it's everything for a voice without the oscillator, everything for a voice without the sound. And so I can mult an output or an oscillator output from something, or something like the pizza has multiple oscillator outputs. There's a sub, a main, and a pulse. I can just send one of those into the Trivium, and then I can send it triggers from something else, and I can have a whole nother voice using the voices that I already have. So it's very, very cool. It's a great voice, or a great module for making voices. Electron model cycles can be set to use either MIDI adapter type. Yes, very cool as well. WMD Metro has accent module expander. Well, I mean, the Metron has Volterras, which are not really accent modules. They're CV, they're programmable CV modules. So they're not really accent expanders. And that's not at all what the feel thing in the clutch does. What this does is it takes your straight 16th notes that you're sending it, and it sends it sends them different rhythms of accents. So each time I click and it goes to a different color here, that's a different groove. So here we go to the next one. So it's sending it different grooves, and the cool thing with this is that you can build your own for this, and then you can just easily switch between them, or you can use the preset ones that are already built into this. With the Volterras, you have a way to, using a knob, send different CV, and you can program in different CV levels, but you can't have like a set pattern that you always save and then you always come back to. That's what's different with that. So that's the different thing with the Volterras. If the Volterra is the expander that you're talking about, I think. Let's see. Hey, from Australia, what's going on? Where in Australia are you? I used to live in Australia. Curious where you are. I'm slow when it comes to routing stuff. Yeah, I mean, routing that's kind of where you get a lot of the flexibility with a lot of these machines, and it can be the part that breaks your brain when you're like, how do I want to send this, and where do I want to send this, and what do I want to control what, and whatever. So yeah, sometimes thinking through that and writing down exactly what you want to use can be very helpful. Man, now I want one of them. Is that you're talking about the clutch? Yeah, the clutch is awesome. It's like instant groove machine. That's what's so cool about it, is that it's just like, it's like a great groove generator. And you can do it with like super short sounds that just go like, Here, I'll take off the effect. It's just so easy to come up with something interesting just by using the randomization of that and just kind of randomly throwing those grooves into things. It's a super fun way to do it. Oh, accent. I totally forgot about that. I think I have one of those. I think Alex gave me one of those. Yes, you're totally right. I completely forgot about that. But it's a little different again. That's kind of for Metron only as an expander. But yeah, what's cool with the feel thing is just the ease of it, and then you just like switch through them just using one toggle. So it's a very quick thing to do. Yeah, very quick thing to do. Let's see. Are there headphones that will allow you to hear music I'm making in small clubs with horrible monitors and huge reflections? Yeah, when I play live, I never use the monitors in the venues because it's so rare that there are good monitors in venues. So I actually use these. So I have in-ear monitors. That's what I'm using right now as well. And I've got one hanging out here. But yeah, just pop these in, and then this goes into my, I have a headphone output from my monitor, and on the new mixer, there's a headphone output from that too, and you can set that to be a Q or main output, and I just set it as my main output so that I can hear my whole mix, and that way I can dial things in without having to worry about random bad reflections and all that stuff. So yeah, I totally feel your pain. Yeah, dedicated module would be fun, because then you can use it without the sequencer or without the clutch or whatever. I mean, imagine being able to have a dedicated feel module that you could use with any percussive module, or even melodic things, and having some really cool melodies, and then send it through there and get accents and get all kinds of cool groove and that stuff in your performance. It'd be very, very cool. So, well, we're at 3 hours. I think this has been a long one, a good one and a long one. But I think we're going to probably call it there, unless anybody has any last questions or comments or anything. Do my in-ear monitors block the sound from the club? Yes. These are Sennheiser. They're kind of the cheap ones. They're like less than $100, and they're great. They seal really well, and they block out the sound of the club very well. But yeah, there's all sorts of them out there. I mean, you can get them from $20 to $2,500 in your monitors. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. So yeah. So if there's any last questions, great. If not, please sign up for my Patreon, which you can see the link to down below, patreon.com/Sherko. That's what supports the channel and allows me to keep doing these things for free and getting everybody out there. Is the people who are supporting through Patreon financially, which is great. That helps out a ton. And you can get a lot of great stuff like weekly group Zoom calls where I can answer your questions and show you stuff and help you through your own stuff and teach. We talked this morning a lot about marketing and promoting yourself and using social media properly and all that kind of stuff. There's certain tier levels where you can get a one-on-one with me for an hour once a month, which is also great. You also get discounts on courses, discount or free sample packs, depending on the tier that you sign up for. For the upcoming show at Superbooth, for anybody that is in the insider or collaborator tier, which are the two top tiers of the Patreon, I'm going to have, for some of those people, I'm going to have a limited number of early access for that event. So you can get into the place early while we're doing our sound check. So you can see how the sound check works and you can meet the other artists and stuff like that. So if you're interested in doing that, sign up for one of those levels of the Patreon, and then you'll be eligible to maybe get one of those limited spots for the for early access to the event. So it's cool to kind of see the behind the scenes, how we set up, meet the artists, see the sound check, see what we're doing, the stuff that you don't normally get to see. So if you're into it, that's available for that level of the Patreon. And then you also have my courses. If you're interested in the Improvised Live Performance course or the Hybrid Production course, those are available, again, link down in the description, circlelive.com/courses. And you can check those out, which are tons of fun. A bunch of the people here in the chats have taken the courses, and you'll learn a lot, and you get a lot of attention paid specifically to your setup and how you're doing things, and explaining a lot of what I'm talking about here, but in a lot more detail, and yeah, with a lot more of kind of a method to you setting up your thing. Not just showing you how I use my stuff. So sign up for one of the courses, join Patreon, use the affiliate links down below. All of those things help out very much. And yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in. It's so great to be back to live streaming. And I look forward to doing another one of these hopefully next weekend. So I will talk to you guys all very soon. And